My name is Dasha Ilic. You are listening to the Ethical Journalism Network podcast. Our guest today is Olaf Steenfadt, Project Director of Journalism Trust Initiative at Reporters Without Borders. Hello, good day. I wanted to start with a very general question. I think that you are the best person to explain what the Journalism Trust Initiative is about.
Well, interestingly, and it might surprise you, it's not about trust. If I were to find a name for this initiative today, I would definitely not call it anything with trust, because this is probably, and the whole thing has been such a deep learning curve, one of those learnings, that trust is deeply personal and deeply subjective. You can very well trust Breitbart, and that's, just a personal thing. But it's probably more about trustworthiness and about rewarding compliance with professional norms in our trade.
So in a nutshell, it is about determining trustworthy media. And you've decided to gather the media around the world who are trustworthy. So what I'm interested to hear is more about tools or the process. How do we do that?
Yes, sure. Well, to begin with, at Reporters Without Borders, I think we came to believe that journalists are not only victims and targets, but also should be part of the solution, particularly when it comes to disinformation. So the Journalism Trust Initiative, about many things we do at RSF, is an enabling environment for individual journalists, but also collectively for our profession. And obviously, it won't come as a surprise to anyone that an abundance of professional norms exist in newsrooms at international levels. And when you compare them, interestingly, there is not even much, I would say, deviation. So the essence of what good journalism is all about seems to be pretty much consensual. But we identified two problems. One is compliance. Do we as a journalistic community really stick to our own norms? And what happens if we don't? And let's be honest, the whole situation is also a deep look into the mirror, I guess for everyone these days, but definitely also for journalists and journalism. And the second problem is more systemic, if you wish, and this is all about algorithmic amplification, which, as we all know, tends to push the exact opposite of ethical journalism, but falsehoods and hate and lies and conspiracy theories and **** news. We really try to avoid the term because we believe it's part of the problem, but let's call it disinformation. So we, I think, discovered, like probably many others as well before us, that this is more a problem of design. And this means that the solution also must be about design of systems. And this is what the Journalism Trust Initiative tries to do. So if you wish, the concept is to provide the missing link between mostly existing professional norms in our profession on the one hand, and the algorithmic indexation of content in search, in social media feeds, and even, and maybe importantly, even in programmatic advertising.
I would like now to just explain a little bit about the process that we, Ethical Journalism Network and Reporters Without Borders, are implementing in the Balkans. So we had this process, or we call it ethical audits, but it's basically just conducting the self-assessment questionnaire. We had about 10 media outlets in Albania and Serbia last year doing the questionnaire and actually having that long look at the mirror and see what is missing at their media practice. The results and the findings, the feedback is great. I'm interested to hear, according to Reporters Without Borders and your experience so far, what kind of media in size, in nature, are ready to have a look at the mirror, are ready to conduct the questionnaire, this self-assessment, or to do this self-audit, if you like? Is it diversity of the media, or do you have any kind of knowledge about that?
Well, in principle, you can imagine that the smaller and smallest media outlets are closest to our heart. So in principle, they should benefit most, or at least to the extent everybody else does. In the current pilot testing of this instrument, I think we see, and this is of course also intended, a quite large variety of media outlets in size, in type, and geography. And this is very important for us as a proof of concept. And when it comes to demand, I mean, what this instrument basically does, you can really consider it a checklist or a diagnostic tool for editorial management systems, is that in some cases, really large established legacy media outlets are surprised themselves to identify some, gaps and flaws, and then they can fix it. And maybe some smaller ones might, just because they started afresh, new, might be in a much better position when it comes to these editorial guidelines, and of course also in many cases supported by the likes of Ethical Journalism Network and others to basically assist and get this going. So a lot of surprises. I can mention one, I would say medium-size local newspaper in the global north, which is around for 100 plus years, running JTI with very high confidence, just to find out that they have 0 editorial guidelines in writing. And of course they thought, well, yeah, that's a good idea to have them. And thanks for letting us know by means of running this test. And now they have it. And I think and they also, I guess, believe it's a good thing. But this is one of the surprises we get.
That was also the case with some of the media in the Balkans, and our feedback is also good because not only the editorial guidelines, but for instance, gender representation and privacy policies was a little bit changed. Obviously, that's changing, and that's why we are there and we have this initiative in general. So to us, it is interesting to find this good media or trustworthy media. Apart from that, what are the other benefits, like more practical benefits for the media that decide to go through this process?
Yeah, I guess there's a range of benefits to point at. The first, and I think the most immediate one, is the diagnostic kind of checklist internal self-assessment function of this instrument. And again, maybe it's important to emphasize this is not about content. So we are not ranking or rating or providing an instrument to say this is a good article or not. Frankly, because this would be a terrible idea, can easily lead to censorship and probably just be misused all along. So it's only looking about the manufacturing level of journalism, the processes in the newsroom, and really running a thorough check and self-assessment. We believe it's in the best interest of every media outlet around the world. And this is what I think the pilot project or the pilot phase at the moment also proves, that this is really meeting a demand. Mm-hmm. Secondly, once you've done that, of course, the next step would be, and this is what the JTI also offers, to turn this self-assessment into public disclosure, into, if you wish, structured, enlarged imprint, which you can put on your website and just be transparent. I mean, we journalists are always good in demanding transparency from others, and that's our job. But being transparent ourselves also, we believe, caters to elevated trust. And maybe not even only with the audiences and communities we serve, but also towards, philanthropy, donors, regulators, advertisers. So it is also pretty much, I would say, a business-to-business instrument where also trust and relationships matter just as much as with audiences and consumers and clients. And the third and last dimension, and this is probably the added value and also unique feature of the Journalism Trust Initiative, because we manage to enshrine this into an official ISO type standard document, you can get audited against your self-assessment and really receive a certification, which of course is the main currency in proving that you live up to what you claim you do.
And not to mention that for the media who do this, who go through this process, for the donors, that would also good look, because you are showing the commitment to ethical standards, and I'm sure that the donors really like to see that. But also, if we are talking about the algorithm that you mentioned, is there any kind of opportunity to rank higher in the Google search?
Yes, I mean, this is what this instrument allows to do, but of course we cannot force Google and Facebook to actually use it. However, what we currently see in the political debate is, I think, an elevated understanding that you need these types of instruments to, and in legalese political language, it's called due prominence. So a mechanism to actively support trustworthy sources of content and public interest journalism, that it is not enough just to apply sanctions and delete harmful content and chase malicious actors, but at the same time actively provide a competitive advantage for those that comply with professional norms and ethical standards. And in order to implement this logic, you need this instrument, you need this data channel, because it's all about data. Programmatic advertising, algorithmic indexation of content works by means of signals. And you have to provide this signal to identify media outlets that are compliant, and ideally, of course, align ad spend and elevated reach and revenue with compliance with professional norms. That would be the ultimate goal.
For the Ethical Journalism Network, we will use this conversation with you, with this podcast, to play it to our future partners in Montenegro and Macedonia. So that's our future plans. But can you tell us just briefly, what are the next steps for Reporters Without Borders in terms of JTI?
Briefly looking back, what we have established already is publishing this official standard document together and under the auspices of the European Committee for Standardization, which is the European or regional subset of ISO, the International Standards Organization. So this box is ticked. The next one, and we are almost there, is to turn this questionnaire, this checklist, into an interactive online self-assessment web application. So interested media outlets can log in and just run this checklist online, and also turn this into a transparency report for public disclosure, and also at a later stage maybe invite a certification body to run the audit inside this tool. So this is, I think, not very typically for a human rights NGO like Reporters Without Borders to run such a high-profile IT project, but this is what's currently on its way to be launched in April. So it's quite near in terms of, it's scary, I must say, looking at the timeline. And then it's about stimulating usage of this instrument near and far. As I said earlier, with tangible benefits for the main target group, which is media outlets, but also other stakeholders like regulators, like advertising sector, etc., to make use of these data sets to the maximum extent possible.
Thank you, Olaf, for talking to the Ethical Journalism Network.